you about the role that the U.S. has played in the topic we're discussing today. And please, anyone else on the panel is welcome to jump in on this also. It seems like the state that built the interdependent and foundational economic order that we benefit from today is now the one that is simultaneously fragmenting it and pulling it apart. And so is fragmentation just inevitable at this point? In your opinion, is that partially driven by actions taken by the United States?
Well, I mean, it is driven also by the United States. I mean, with all the tariffs implemented last year and all those uncertainties and insecurities right now. But I hope that, I mean, while fragmentation takes place, that we do find ways to stabilize the international rules-based order, because it's so important for our prosperity around the world, and especially for smaller states. The WTO ministerial is just around the corner end of this month. And while this organization is flailing, so to say, with regard to rule setting, enforcement, and also dispute settlement, there are also ideas on the table how to move forward with plurilateral agreements, for example, for investment facilitation, for example, or for digital trade, or also for some environmental issues. And there are a lot of countries who are actually still interested in a rules-based order and who would like to move forward on those plurilaterals. Unfortunately, there's still a consensus principle which impedes this. So I think that would be a great signal around the world. End of this March, end of this month, let's move forward on these initiatives among the countries of the willing who still fight for a rules-based order.
Rachel, I just wanted to comment here. When we talk about the rule-based international order that many Western voices invoke as a framework worth preserving, we have to recognize the fact that that order itself was not new to start with. It did embed existing power asymmetries, and it granted de facto veto to the strongest players and also extended great benefits to those who helped design it. So the existing order was not something from a developing country perspective particularly worth preserving. Therefore, any disruption is actually an intermediate stage to hopefully evolving something that is fairer and more symmetric than asymmetric.
I think that's an excellent point. I think we're going
Maybe I recognise that as well, because more generally around, we talked earlier on about economic resilience and economic security. For us, we also see that as operational resilience as well. That the global financial system, the risk of fragmentation we talked about, we also need to guard against the possibility of having different systems which are not resilient, and we need to make sure that there is that trust, that security, and that control, and around the data and governance of the financial system as well. I think we need to bear that in mind as well as we think through some of these issues. That the global financial system is very much about trust and security.
I just wanted to add the point that, following up on your question about the U.S., I think we're at a point where multilateral cooperation is urgently needed on some of these issues. I think there was an attempt under the Biden administration to have these discussions, whether it was about semiconductor supply chains or critical raw materials. We are seeing the Trump administration is not known for its multilateral approach. We are seeing some signs that the U.S. is waking up to the idea that, or this administration is that cooperation on rare earths, critical raw materials is necessary. So there have been a series of meetings in Washington now. And I hope that this is perhaps a sign of things to come in the coming years. I think there is a huge need for India, Japan, Europe, the U.S. to cooperate on these economic security issues. They're usually complex, and they require, as I said earlier, governments and companies to sort of rethink the way they rewire themselves in how they deal with these challenges. So I just wanted to emphasize that point, that in order to create the scale needed to respond to China, we really need more of this cooperation on that.
Thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to bring in the audience for questions. We have our Raisina Young Fellows over here on the right, and so, ma'am, I'd like to start with you. Just keep, since we don't have very much time left, just keep it pretty quick and make sure it ends in a question. Thanks. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ludovica, and I'm part of the Young Fellow Program, and I'm Italian, and I work for an Italian think tank. So my question is for Mr. Working. You know, in the past year, we've heard a lot about the risking, the coupling, friendshoring, and in particular, friendshoring holds considerable promise for mitigating risk and dependencies in key areas that are the semiconductor industry, the EVs, as well as the critical minerals. But yet, as 2026, we still see that progress for EU remain limited. And for example, we can mention the EU-Australia MOU on the critical minerals. So my question is, drawing on your experience and expertise on EU, China, as well as the transatlantic relations, do you think this approach, so the risking, could be actually effective to improve the EU competitiveness, also considering the Draghi reports and everything that's being stressed from it? And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. That was to Stormy, or that to Noah? Okay.
Was that to me? Yeah. That's what I understood, but maybe I was wrong.
Both of you talk about this.
Okay. I think, de-risking is hard enough when you're one country. When you're 27 countries, it's much harder. You need to reach a consensus on some very complex issues. So I think Europe, let's be honest, has struggled with de-risking. I don't think a lot of de-risking has gone on. We've had a lot of strategy documents, a lot of communications on this, but I think the need the implementation hasn't really been there, and that's partly because the EU it can be a cumbersome piece. So I actually think we need to think about some fundamental reform in Europe to make Europe more nimble, less reactive, and I think, I've had some conversations just in the past days on this with various European officials. I think there are two ways forward. One is to hand over more competencies to the European Commission. I don't detect a lot of appetite for that in the big European capitals these days. And the other option is for a core group of states, Germany, France, Netherlands, Poland, Italy, Nordic countries. I see a Swedish friend there, so to push ahead and develop an agenda and a coalition of people to push ahead on some of these economic security issues. I don't think we're there yet. I think Germany and France right now are having trouble getting on the same page on some of these big issues. But Europe has to become faster and nimbler.
Thanks.
If I may also just briefly jump in here. I'm personally not a great fan of the concept of friendshoring. Which was your friend today, might not be your friend tomorrow, who knows. But diversification of sources and also supply markets, sales markets is really important. So I mentioned earlier on that deepening the EU and deeper integration is a very important aspect of increasing resilience. There's a really great study by the IMF which quantified the internal barriers in terms of what it would mean as a tariff. So for goods, the tariff amount, those regulations would be at 14% for zero tariff. And for services, it's 110. So we're not talking about 10 or 15 invites, that is not. So we have to build ourselves different regulations, regulatory barriers, which is way hard to increase resilience. Another issue is enlargement. So that doesn't mean necessarily always needs to mean getting to countries, other countries like Western Balkans, completely into the EU. But deepening integration, economic integration with those countries is also a great way to increase resilience. And then some partnerships. I mean, the EU has resource partnerships, which work so, I would say, so far. And I think we need to revisit some of those functional partnership ideas to make them also a lot more attractive to partners, and also ensure that there is actually technology investment to spur everything else which is gone to those partnerships which get as to deliver. So I think there are lots of different instruments. Some of them work, some of them not so well, and we need to revisit what we can make better.
We have room for 2 more questions, that's it, so just be quick and I'll come back to the panel for final thoughts. Sir, over to you.
Hi there, I'm Eric Pinto. I think American Ontario's Graduate Office at the Consulate of New York and with the Raisina Dailogue. For decades, integration and global supply chains have been the pathway for development and growth. But in a world that's moving more towards economic security and reshoring, what happens then to countries like middle powers and smaller ones that have been heavily reliant on export-led growth? Thank you.
The second question.
Thanks. Economic security seems possible to require changes in how businesses act. My question would be, how do you mention take practices and how
Sir, can you speak in the microphone a little bit more so we can hear you? Thanks.
Yes, we're sorry. And my question would be, economic security also requires changes to the way businesses conduct and their basic activities. How do we incentivize them to do it, and how do we create predictability?
Is that someone specific that you want? Okay. Okay, maybe just really quick, please quick.
My question is very short. Is World Trade Organization becoming European organization to deal with resilience? Because India is suffering, having trade crisis in European countries as well as USA, Canada.
Thank you. Start at the end and then come to Tadeshi and then Hayden and then we'll go ahead.
So on the first question, if I'm not mistaken, the question is how do small nations dependent on exports take care of their economic security or economic growth in these circumstances? I mean, it's a very important question, but unfortunately no easy answers. So they are going to find themselves at the sort of the wrong end of the scale in terms of being able to maintain growth, because they don't have domestic demand to fall back on, and therefore they will find they have to choose, unfortunately, which block to align themselves with, because if they choose to be neutral across blocks, which is a possibility, but increasingly they are being compelled to choose between blocks. So like in every policy decision, it's a trade-off that they have to exercise as to which one is a relatively better bet for them. That is the cold reality. They would benefit from a much more open order, but that is not going to be the case. That kind of feeds into the last question, whether WTO is a European organization, etc. One of the few, or probably the only multilateral institution that was based on equal voting rights was WTO. And that could be one of the reasons why it has been somewhat dysfunctional. Because developed countries used to asymmetric voting rights couldn't quite accept the symmetric voting rights that were embedded in WTO. And that would be one of the reasons that has made it somewhat dysfunctional in nature. So I think from a developing country perspective, it is important to preserve the WTO because it is the only organization that gives them equal rights. But that said, it is a reality that the world will be moving towards plurilateral structures rather than multilateralism, because developed countries do not find it now advantageous to continue with the existing multilateral order. That's a reality that developing countries also have to get used to.
Well, I was invited to Saturday Street to the 24 by Slovenian government, base 24. only former folks out of former Yugoslavia, only Slovenia and Croatia are member of the European Union. The other countries like Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Albania, so those countries are put in a waiting list. And it takes more than 5 to maybe 10 years. So that's, well, I feel that's frustration of those countries. That's, they are not able to speak and also that we demonstrate solidarity among the people. So that with or without European Union framework, I believe that Japan is now outreaching to those countries by means of the history to make a capital fund, to make investment in the countries, no members or members, I don't care, so that we are now able to provide some capital to those countries to be engaged with those countries. That's one issue. Two is that China also tried to outreach to the global south countries by means of Shanghai Cooperation on Investment issue. And then countries now the members or observers of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, they have a very different interest, not the same interest. India try to neutralize the use of China using that Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And then Iran, for example, Iran is also member. So that's we are not invited because we are G7 countries. But probably that we need to pay attention to the movements of the growing global south. And I had a chat with Ajay Banga, the president of the World Bank, and then he is also the king of the role of the World Bank and the International Organization to be bridges.
So our time is up, but do you want to just end on a high note here pretty quickly? Because
very quickly. I think it's important to think about, talk about the different countries needing to be involved. From a Swiss point of view, we are a globally inclusive organisation, and whether you're a small country, a small economy or a large economy, having that connections and that cooperation is vital.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking our panel for an excellent discussion.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.